My name is Elizabeth Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom to 4 kids, ages 2 through 9, and we are learning how to make joy normal.
My name's Bonnie Landry, and I want to welcome you to season 2 of our podcast, Make Joy Normal. We want to thank everybody for their support and how much you've shared this podcast with your friends and those who you think it would be helpful for. I am a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma. I've been homeschooling for 30 years. My kids are ages 14 to 33. I only have one at home now. I'm a speaker, a writer, a blogger, and I guess we're podcasters now, Elizabeth. And I'm an advocate of joy. So welcome to our podcast. Okay, good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm going to start with my spiel, as you say. First of all, if you'd like to submit questions to our podcast, please do so via Instagram. You can message me, or Facebook, my Facebook group, Make Joy Normal, or you can also get me through my website. There's an email contact page. Whatever way you'd like to submit your questions, we're happy to receive them. And Elizabeth is a master at grouping them in such a way that they all make sense. And also, I am told by the podcast people, tell people to subscribe, ask people to leave a review. That's how our podcast gets more known. And so we've experienced a lot of growth, and thank you so much for all the shares that you have given us. It's been lovely, but very exciting for us to see where this podcast life is taking us. Yes. So we are going to be talking about today, I don't know what the questions are yet, but the questions are about mom guilt. So under that major heading, there's a lot of mom guilt.
A ton.
Yeah.
And I feel like I contacted you this week and just kind of thought, okay, I have something very specific I'm feeling that mom guilt about. Let's make it an episode. You know?
It was a great idea. And I put it out there on Facebook, and had some beautiful responses from people like, yes, yes, I feel mom guilt. And some people responded with only a couple of things. Some people I had a laundry list of the things they feel mom guilt over, but the struggle is real.
Right. Oh, it is for sure. So I kind of thought I'd start with like being specific about what I was going through this week with my own guilt, and kind of how I resolved it in a very non-Elizabeth way, if I could coin a new phrase. But
that's awesome.
And I asked my son's permission to talk about this because I want to be, courteous of him and his feelings, since this is like public forever now.
Right.
But so he does struggle with ADHD, which makes learning very, very difficult, and teaching very, very difficult. And I've tried different curriculums, different things, and all the while I feel like he's just been falling behind. And every time I talk to people, they try and validate by saying, oh, kids with ADHD are notoriously horrible spellers. They do struggle with math, and a lot of it has to do with their inability to really kind of focus on that kind of stuff, to really bring attention to it and learn, right?
Right.
And so I just was feeling so defeated, so much mom guilt, really kind of thinking, am I the best educator for him? Because I want him to thrive, right? That's what we want as parents, is for our kids to thrive. And so, kind of almost lucky for me, now is really not the time to even consider pushing a child maybe to a school system, because they're all whacked right now.
Yeah.
So it kind of dawned on me that I'd never really actually looked into seeing if there was anybody that had made a homeschooling curriculum for ADHD kids. So I just thought, I'll Google it. And I will say I haven't found a specific homeschooling curriculum that does that, but there were a lot of online learning websites that I found. And one in particular kind of had mixed reviews, but kind of in desperation, my husband and I decided to give it a try. And the reason it's very anti-Elizabeth's thinking is because I've kind of always been against technological, like using computers or iPads for learning. Because I guess I have this old way of thinking, that 100 years ago, they didn't have technology and kids learned,
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, I've been pretty against it, but as I'm reading I'm learning about ADHD and how they need a focus point, right? And my son is really good at focusing when the TV is on, or, when there's a computer game, right? And there's
Yeah.
a reason ADHD kids are able to kind of use technology to their advantage. And
Right.
so I kind of threw up my hands and I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot.
Right.
So we started it today. And I actually went to my husband and I was crying because our school day just went so amazing. My son wanted
Oh,
to keep going. He was like,
yeah.
I'm going to do the next lesson. I'm going to do the next lesson. And it was like, okay, maybe this is going to work. So I can't write here a review on whether it will work or not,
Right.
but it feels like a step in the right direction. And
Right.
I'm kind of using it as a bridge to kind of maybe fill in. I know you talk a lot about how kids are where they are supposed to be. There's not
Right.
really being behind, but also I feel like he was behind in learning. It was almost like we were just staying in the same place,
Right.
instead of
Well, and
moving
it's
forward.
interesting because, I mean, we all have to, only the parents know the kids the way they know the kids, right?
Mhm.
And so we always have to just respect that every family has its own things it's dealing with, and we can't get inside that, right? So I
Right.
mean, you can support a thing or honor a thing, or um you know uh, sort of have a certain idea about how things will roll, but ultimately some kids are going to learn better different ways, and sometimes we really have to think outside the box, even if it's our own box, like
Right.
I don't want to use any technology.
Hmm.
Right. I had a friend, just a kind of a similar story, but years ago I had a friend who, her and her husband are actually both teachers, and she really loved the idea of unschooling.
Hmm.
Right. And so for several years, she tried to be an unschooler. Right. But she was super stressed out all the time and ended up, after a number of years, putting her kids in school.
Hmm.
Right. And so it might have been, I mean, I don't know, that was her life, this is mine, but it might have been a situation where if she had not really hung on to this ideology that wasn't working for her, she was just too stressed for it.
Yeah.
Whether it was working for the kids is one thing, whether it's working for you is quite another,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, and so, we have to always be addressing that, like what is it that can work for me and for my kid, and different things are going to work for different kids.
Hmm.
you know what can work. And so, good for you to be able to find out, okay, this is, and I'd love to hear 3 months from now, I'd love to hear how is that working,
Yeah.
because maybe it's ideal.
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, and also another thing, we're not using it to replace everything. We're still going to sit down and do dictation one-on-one, and we're
Right.
still going to, further our history curriculum that we're doing, so it's not like I'm just, here's the computer, go. Like I'll actually sit with him and, check in with him, do you understand this? Should we
Right.
replay this? And I just feel like it's kind of helping me maybe learn other ways of instructing certain things,
Yeah,
um
exactly.
so
It's interesting because last night we did this interview that I did with Father Harrison was about the parents' role in education, right?
mhm,
And so we went through the catechism, those sections in the catechism about, and ultimately what's required of a parent is to be in charge of
mhm,
the child's education. You can contract out either via, a website or via a teacher or via a school. You can contract out,
yeah,
but it's the taking the responsibility is what a parent is obliged to do about
right,
where that education goes, right? So I mean, you're the one who knows your child best, right?
yeah,
You have to be able to do that. So maybe we can check back with you in 2 or 3 months and sort of see where things are, because I think
yeah,
that would be interesting for other parents who are dealing with the same issue.
right. Because I think as a homeschooling parent, there's nothing worse than feeling like your kid is losing traction and losing ground in their education.
Right. Yeah.
Because especially with kids with learning disabilities, not just ADHD, you kind of have it from all sides. Can they read, can they write, how are they on
Right.
spelling and critical thinking, and simple math,
Right.
it's a lot. And I was very weighed down by it. It was like I looked forward to the weekends because I didn't have to worry about,
Right.
the
Yeah.
homeschooling and I really enjoy homeschooling my kids. I don't enjoy doubting how they're doing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Just because the questions in my mind, so it's probably in other people's minds, is what subjects do they teach on this particular platform, just so
Right.
that people know.
So far, it does a K through 8th, I think it is. And so
Right.
you can kind of pick and choose. So I went ahead and did the K through 3rd for my son. But you can pick, so say it's math. You can
Okay.
say, okay, well, actually, he's pretty great with math, so we'll do 4th grade math for that. But his
Right.
language skills, maybe 1st or 2nd grade. So
Yeah.
that's great. But to answer your question, it's like language arts, math, then history, or like social studies, right? So
Right.
math, but with the history aspect of it, and then science.
Okay.
Which I'm
And
really
so do you
terrible.
pay per subject, or you pay per?
It's monthly pay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's one flat fee. So you can access all of that depending on
Right.
what you want.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And
We should have the name of the company just so that we can.
yeah, I think it's Time for Learning.
Oh, okay. I've seen that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it really has mixed reviews, but then so does every other
Yeah.
online site. And so I kind of thought, since I'm not trying to use this as, the sole way of educating him,
Right.
I could probably pick and choose. And one thing I'm looking for is making sure it's not Common Core math.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So people will, just on the topic of people, sort of giving mixed reviews about things. I happened to come across a review of somebody reviewing my workshop on some thread. I don't even know how I came across it, but anyway, stumbled across it. And so, there was all these really nice comments about, how people had gained and what they had, thought and what direction it took them and all that. And then this one person said, if she's on YouTube, she's just out to make money. That's all YouTube is about. Everybody on there wants to make money. And I thought, wait a second, I was actually making money on that workshop and I made it free for YouTube. It's like,
Right.
really? Really? Do I look like the big money maker? Oh, well.
Wait, says the person, was this a YouTube video talking about people monetizing, or was it just a written review?
Yeah. Oh, it was a written review.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but it was such a funny thing. And my son actually told me that when we got our YouTube channel. He says, Mom, sometimes people are going to leave really awful reviews.
Yeah.
Just so you know, that's what happens. So it's a good thing he said that, because it was like, yeah, like, okay.
Right. You can't please everybody.
Just part of the program.
Right.
Yeah. So just to clarify for anybody out there, I'm not making money. Oh
Right.
my gosh. So, okay, let's get on to the meat of our questions.
All right.
So mom guilt,
Yes.
Elizabeth's mom guilt, and one way through mom guilt.
All right. So let's see here. This one was a good one. So the person on Facebook, I actually forgot to write down names, so I apologize. But she said that she worries that she's not patient enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're not.
Right.
We're not patient enough. There's no such thing as the perfect parent.
Right.
Right. Should we be working to become more patient? Yeah, of course. We should be working towards being better human beings. And I think that really the starting point, I'll tell you this, I am not a patient person. Okay. And it was probably my biggest concern is like, am I patient enough to do this? Because I'm not patient. But I had the wherewithal to think, okay, maybe I can learn patience through this, which is really, really what happened. It was that through having small children, through, working through, their education with them, I developed a lot of patience over the years. And I would consider myself now a pretty patient person. But, that was a long track. So you have to be very gentle with yourself wherever you're at, right? I feel guilty because I'm not patient, so, okay. So try to be objective. Am I actually really impatient, or am I just kind of a normal amount of impatient? Whatever amount of impatient you are, you should be trying to get better at that, right?
Right.
And sort of master ourselves in those areas, and whether it's anger, impatience, or whatever. But we have to be gentle with where we're at, and maybe even say to your kids, hey, I'm working on patience, right? And this is how I'm planning on doing that. But sometimes I'm gonna blow it. So,
Right.
so in terms of dealing with the guilt, I think the primary thing is just being gentle with yourself. Is okay, I recognize I have this problem, right? I'm not very patient. And small children will bring out the impatience in all of us, right? Even for somebody who was maybe patient before that, right? Prior to having children, we have to learn that skill sometimes all over again if it's something that you
Sure.
naturally already had attained, right? And so be very, very gentle, and just sort of, if you can imagine yourself kind of learning in baby steps, is that, what, as long as you are positively working towards improving that which you think is a detriment, then you don't have to feel guilt about it, because you're doing something about it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something we have to, hear over and over and over. And be gentle with yourself. Take yourself where you are and move forward. Doesn't mean just okay to be impatient. It means that you've acknowledged something, good self-knowledge, right?
Right.
You've acknowledged something, and now, okay, what do I do about that? How do I learn to be more patient, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, I
so,
think for me, I recognize my patience kind of wanes by the end of the day. Like in the
yeah,
morning, hey guys, can you pick this up? Okay. 10 minutes later, it's still not picked up. An hour later, it's still not
yeah,
picked. And then it's like, okay, that's when my
mhm,
patience is gone, like,
yeah.
so
When I think with most things, probably most of the kinds of things we're going to come across, that there's a certain amount you can do to manipulate your environment
mhm,
to make that thing better, right?
right.
But then there's also this acknowledgement side of things, is like, okay, what is the reality of this? Because ultimately this is about guilt, right?
Mhm,
So is the guilt going to go away about you being impatient because you grow in patience? Maybe not.
mhm,
You know what I mean? So that's where you have to, the other side of it has to always be present, right? I am going to actively work on myself so that I can put aside that feeling of guilt. I can apologize if I've blown my top. I can take time for myself if that's going to be something that will help me. So you can manage things, and it's
mhm,
a good idea to manage things, but then we also need to always be looking at, okay, where's this coming from?
right.
Is it coming from my imperfections? Well, I'm not perfect, and as long as I can acknowledge that and move forward in whatever areas I can, then you're doing all that you can. And just know, like, and regardless of what you're seeing, we always look at somebody else and think, oh, they're so much more patient than me. Well, you are in public too, right? You take your kids out in public and you're just a beacon of kindness and patience, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
we publicly parent better than we privately parent. I remember saying that to myself when my kids were young. If only I could be the mom I am in public when I'm at home.
Right.
And but the home is where we are safe enough to blow our corks now and again, or whatever. It's if those things are happening all the time that we need to really take a good hard look at that. It's always going to happen
Right.
occasionally, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, moving on, and this was mentioned more than once, um, but the house not being clean enough, or if it is clean enough, that means kind of neglecting that face-to-face time with our kids on an individual
Yeah,
level,
yeah.
which I can relate to 100%.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because the house isn't clean enough. You need to end the sentence, for what?
Right.
Right? For what?
Yeah.
Who is it? Is it for you? Because for me, that would primarily be for me, right?
Mhm.
That if like I start to get pretty agitated, if I don't mind toys laying around, things like that, but if I feel like dishes are piling up, and there's leftover food sitting out and things like that, that would get to me.
Mhm.
But yeah, so is it for your own self-preservation,
Right.
right? Or is it because, you're worried that your husband's going to feel like, you're not doing a good enough job, you're not holding, is it a sign, do you feel like it's a sign that you are inadequate in some way, right? Something to bear in mind, just as a practical management tool. Again, you're going to look at the management side of things first. You know, if you had your kids in private school, even if you had them in public school, there's a cost to that, right? And if you feel like you're really would benefit from this, if you had your kids in public school or private school, obviously there's a big expense there. Could you take a tenth of what you might have paid for a private school and apply that to getting some housework help, right?
Right.
Maybe you have someone come in every 2 weeks and do your bathrooms, or it doesn't have to be you get someone every week and it's a huge expense at the end of the month. But could you get someone in to help out? Could you, if you can't afford an actual professional cleaner, could you, is there a girl that could come in, a homeschool family that has an older daughter that might want to, make minimum wage and
Sure.
and help out with some cleaning and whatnot? Those are certainly viable options from the management perspective. But again, I think that we need to find the answer to the question. My house isn't clean enough for what? Right? What is it? Is it my expectations? Is it because it's difficult to find anything? Is it because I'm worried my husband, because I don't want to have people over? What is the reason for that? Because that's what we need to take a look at in terms of the guilt, right?
Right.
When we feel guilty about the house, if we don't know why we're feeling guilty, it's a bit hard to deal with the guilt, right? So if it's something that we feel like our husband is going to feel like you're not doing a good enough job, right? That maybe, that really has to spark a conversation is, I feel like I can't keep up. So how can we manage this better? Or I feel like you might be judging me because I'm, whatever. And maybe he's not at all. Maybe he's completely unconcerned. Maybe he doesn't realize it's starting to drive you crazy and you need some help, right? And of course, as your kids get older too, you can pull them into the picture. But I think really looking at the why, who is it? Is it you, or is it someone else that you're feeling that guilt about, right? Or is it simply that you just feel that you feel inadequate to do all the things, right? I really appreciated when we had Trent on here a few weeks ago, and he said, just know that if you're going to homeschool, something's got to give, right? If your wife is home all day, probably supper's going to be on the table and your house is going to be reasonably tidy, right? If the kids are at school and your wife is home, right? If both of you are working, well, that's a whole different ballgame, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, if your wife has a full-time job educating your children, we have to put expectations in their correct place. And so I would think that it's a really important question to look at, like where is the guilt coming from, and then be able to respond to, okay, I need to offload this. I need to, either get some help or take some time for myself, or solicit help from outside or from inside my home.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And, a messy house is, a sign of life. Right. And sometimes we just have to, be okay with that. I'm a big advocate of order, and I don't mean like I have a pristine home in any way, but just in terms of knowing where everything is important to me. And for me, the answer to that was just having less stuff. Right.
Yeah.
It was just that simple, just owning less stuff, owning less toys, only owning books we actually want to read, and sort of decluttering our lives. That was in terms of on the management end of things, that was something that was really important to me. And I also think is just an alleviation. Like, say, for example, you were minimalist. Okay. And I'm not a minimalist, but say I was, and I only owned, enough dishes for exactly the amount of people in my house, and, whatever, just exactly what we needed and no more. Right. If you can just imagine sort of how much clutter, visual clutter, mental clutter that would alleviate. Right. So, if this is another analogy, you sort of think about your pots and pans and dishes and whatnot in your house. If you had 5 people in your house and you owned 5 plates, 5 forks, 5 knives, 2 pots, 1 frying pan, 5 cups, right, as opposed to what you do own. Most of us own way, way more than that.
Right.
Imagine how simple housework would be,
Mm-hmm.
right? There would never be piling up. There couldn't be,
Right.
right? And so, you know, just the visual of that, when you think, okay, say every dish in your house has been used and you're a minimalist, there's not very many dishes sitting on the counter,
Right.
right? And so the mental space that helps to free up in your brain is just phenomenal. And so to whatever degree we're willing to declutter
Mm-hmm.
is the degree we're going to actually free up more space in our brain to be accessible to the people we love. And I think a lot of times guilt also, of whatever capacity we're experiencing the guilt, but mom guilt in particular, comes from mental clutter,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're kind of frozen, like we can't think about one more thing because our brains are going to explode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, free up that space in your brain, right? However you can do that, and that's order would be a great topic for of conversation. But I think that we feel better as human beings by having order, right?
Right.
And on the other side of the coin, just a quick answer, because this is going to be an episode coming up where we're going to talk about what if you're on the other end of the spectrum, where you're way more likely to be very aware of tidying up your house and that everything's in its place and whatnot, to the detriment of perhaps the relationships with your kids, right? Or
Right.
doing nice things with your kids. And so that's an episode we're going to deal with in the next few weeks, which I think is a really great topic, because I think it has its own whole set of issues.
Yeah.
But again, where's the balance, right?
Sure.
So do I feel better when I just go outside, right? Is that because I'm actually out of the house and I'm not thinking about the mess that's being made or whatever, that we can just go make all the mess we want outside?
Right.
But finding the balance in our brain about how to take care of our brains well enough that we're not experiencing guilt on just a regular daily basis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think for me, it's more of needing to be in control of something in,
Mm-hmm.
in my home, and cleanliness is a big thing for me. And my house is not clean, mind you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like if I stay on top of the kitchen and the dishes, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's clean, and vacuuming is a huge thing that helps just make it feel clean. One thing I don't get though is how, like I could have everything have a place. All, we don't have any tiny toys. Yet somehow I still find these really odds and ends of toys that I don't know where they came from. And that actually drives me crazy, as opposed to just, blocks being on the floor or something. It's those
Right.
little knickknacks that I don't know where they came from.
I know. You almost need a container. Like, okay, every time I come across one of those, I throw it in a container.
Yeah.
For me, it was game pieces. Like, just drove me nuts, because people, like, the kids would put away a game, but then like 3 game pieces would get left out. So years ago, I just started a jar for random game pieces, because I'm not going to go looking for the game, like whatever, that's not my problem. But I just started this jar. It's a great big glass peanut butter jar. And anytime I find a game piece or a spare card, I just threw it in there so the kids knew where to look if they were missing a game piece, right? But it took all the angst out of it for me, right? I just kept it up high, but so the toddlers didn't get into it. Actually, interestingly enough, my grandkids now, when they come over, it's one of their favorite things to do is for me to dump out the game piece jar. There's just all these random game pieces, but they like to play with it.
Yeah. Okay, you just changed my whole life by telling me that.
That's my goal. That's my goal.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm implementing that tomorrow.
Yeah. Here's another thing. This is along the same lines, but essentially in every room of my house, like not the bathrooms, but in a corner of my kitchen, in my laundry room, in my bedroom, in every one of those rooms, I have a little catch-all bowl, right? So there are things that are just those random little things that you're kind of coming across all the time.
Yeah.
That I can just throw it in the little bowl, it's like a soup bowl size. And it's kind of, they look nice because they're in it, but instead of things collecting on the counters, which drives me insane, I just pop them in that bowl. And then maybe, I don't know, whenever it's full, like every 6 months or a year or 1 month, depending on how, how much random
Right.
stuff there is.
Yeah.
I just dump it out, and half of it gets thrown away, but I just dump it out and put the stuff where it belongs, and then, put it back. And so those little catch-all containers in sort of main rooms of your house, so amazing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
because I know you told me about the pencil box, I feel like that could also be a thing that you could use that can be tucked in a cabinet so it's not out,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, those clip boxes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They can go in I used to have in one of our houses, I had like a kitchen cupboard, and
Uh-huh.
all that kind of thing just went in a kitchen cupboard. And it was so worth it to me to lose the cupboard space so that all the kind of school stuff could just be put somewhere tidy,
Right. Right.
you know?
I'm sorry to continue on this topic, but at the end of the Christmas season, when everything gets packed up, I try in vain to make sure every single thing gets put away, right?
Right.
Well, last year, our little baby Jesus for the nativity that the kids kind of just get to play with was left out. So baby
Right.
Jesus was on my kitchen windowsill for an entire year.
So funny, eh? I know I try that too. You clean off the tree and you're whatever, and then you find something like in the couch cushions. So my husband vacuumed out last weekend, vacuumed out the couches,
Uh-huh.
and there was like 5 Christmas hooks and ornaments in there, and it was like, seriously, oh my gosh. Yeah, and again, that's the kind of thing that goes in my little catch-all bowl, so
Yeah.
that the next time I open, and usually it's not till the next Christmas, we open it up
Right,
and then okay,
right.
it can go away where it belongs.
But I just didn't want to shove Jesus in a drawer or anything. So I figured it
Oh
would be
yeah.
better on a windowsill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our baby Jesus goes missing quite frequently.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, should we move on to the kind
Sure.
of the part 2 of that is
More mom guilt. Yeah.
of not spending enough time with our kids, like
Right.
especially for families with multiples, it gets even harder, to spend that quality time with each
Yeah.
one, especially when their interests are so different,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah,
lot
for
of
sure.
guilt.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, for me that, obviously, was the focus of our day because I was homeschooling, but I felt, and I've told you this before, I felt like if I'm one-on-one working with them in the morning, and so that I have time in the afternoon to either do the fun things or do the housework or whatever, that dividing up of my time, like focusing on one thing and focusing on another thing, that, you're kind of spending that time then filling your children's tanks. I want to just sort of make a note of this, is that, the whole method that I have of homeschooling was, my major goal was that I should be able to educate my children and fill their tank at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when I sit down and do that one-on-one, the key to that is being nice. Right. So, that this can be, because often people go through a process where they're kind of like getting their kids to do their schoolwork, hurry up, get your schoolwork done. And then they have to kind of build the relationship up again. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you really focus and make that the time when you're kind, and the time when you're nice, and the time when you're reading and it's pleasant, that their educational experience is pleasant, that I think a lot of the guilt will be alleviated in that way, because you've just spent your whole morning pouring yourselves into them, but
Right.
not getting distracted with the dishes and whatever. Plan a time. Okay, this other time is when I do my stuff, in the afternoon, that's when I get my dishes done, I get my laundry done or whatever. Plan that out. And that takes some discernment, I think, so in order for us to avoid feeling guilt that we're not spending enough time with our kids, we need to make sure that we're spending time with our kids, right? And not always saying, I'll just be right back. I'll be right back, right? Actually just let go of everything else. But as long as you have, know that, okay, I'm going to get to that then. And when we fill our tanks, our kids tend to play better on their own, right? Mm-hmm. So, most of us, the very fact that we're homeschooling should alleviate any mom guilt that you experience, because you're educating your children, and thereby spending lovely time with them, right? If your school environment is angsty, and then you feel like you need to really be spending more time with them, I'm not saying you don't play with them because you educate them, but or read to them or whatever, but that you've had this pleasant interaction with them. If it's not pleasant, that may be something that leads to guilt. Do you know what I mean? Because then you feel like, okay, now I have to also build this relationship up and do the things required to build this relationship up, right? You know, so I mean, I think that planning time to get the work done is super important, and just get done what you can get done. You can only do what you can do,
Right.
right? And so, but if you allow a portion of the day to, you know, to address that, then you don't need to have guilt about the housework that's happening over here as you're spending time with the child, right?
Yeah.
So that we can, you know, there's just a much more sort of holistic environment where, say for example, you were it was summer vacation, you know, and maybe you spend, okay, we spend, you know, your kids are with you and you're in the garden, your kids are with you and you're just enjoying each other's company, because there's not the pressure of school, say,
Right.
you know, education, that you're just more relaxed. And so, you know, you can just, oh, okay, let's go and do the things we want to do in the morning. Let's go to the lake. Let's go, you know, visit some friends, you know, however you choose to spend quality time with your family.
Right.
Then you know you're going to have time later on to do the work, so your interactions are pleasant, therefore the people are happier for longer later on when you're actually trying to do the work, right?
Right.
And of course, if you have very small children, you know, an hour's worth of work takes about 3, so you know you have to factor that in. But
Right.
you know, if the less we can burden ourselves with you know, getting the work done, like the school work, you know, that's a less of a burdensome task and more of a blessing and a gift of a choice that you make to interact with your children in this particular way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I know I can tend to feel guilty because you know we do that sit down work, and you know I feel like it is pleasant. I don't get irritated or yell or anything like that.
Hmm.
You know, I think maybe if my kids are having a rough day and they feel more frustrated, you know, that's where
Right.
that kind of tougher time comes. But today, for example, my 6-year-old was like, "Mom, do you want to play a game with me?" And I kind of was telling him, you know, I'm not really in the mood to play a game, you know, and like before I could continue with either, okay, but I will because I love you, or, you know, let's do this instead, he just immediately started pouting and crying. And, you know, and it's like, you know, like I wouldn't characterize that as manipulation. It was more just like disappointment, you
Frustration or
know,
whatever. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, I wanted to do this with you. Um, but that's just kind of the thing. I don't want to play a game every day, you know, like,
Right. Yeah.
and so that's kind of where my guilt sets in, you know, is my denying him this specific, you know,
Right.
experience. Should I feel guilty over that? Or is it okay to say, no, we're not going to do that today? You know, we can read books or, you know, do
Yeah.
something else. And so I get guilty over that.
Yeah, of course. You know, of course, it's we can totally say, no, I'm actually, you know, really don't want to do that today. That would, you know, just be not the activity I would choose, but I'll do something else. And yeah, maybe they're going to be disappointed, but that's okay. You know,
Mhm.
if you know you're putting in time with them, or if you say, you know, maybe like you hate playing games, or you hate playing tag, or you hate, you know, a particular thing, you know, you can say, you know what, I'm willing to do that a couple times a week. So maybe we could do that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or maybe we could play tag. My kids, for some reason, loved me to play tag with them. And, you know, I don't like to play tag really, but I did it, but I wouldn't do it all the time. Sometimes I'm just going to play tag with you
Right.
because that's fun for you. But you know, we can also balance that off with me saying, actually, I'm just gonna let you guys play tag on your own today, and I'll play with tag with you tomorrow, or but actually follow through, right?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but we don't have to do all the things. And I think it's one of the things that we can really weigh us down as homeschooling parents, is that we can feel like responsible for all of their needs, right?
Hmm.
And first of all, some of their needs can be contracted out, you
Hmm.
know, like a need for sports, or a need for a games night, or a need for crafts. You know, some of those things can be contracted out to other people, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's just a friend that you share that with, or whether it's a um you know, a class they take or something like that. That's perfectly okay. You know, we're filling their needs. They do have needs. They have needs to be cuddled, they have needs to be read to, they have needs to be for physical needs, you know, all kinds of stuff. But we don't have to be the sole person to be fulfilling all those needs, right?
Right.
And so it's okay. I mean, as long as we're kind about it, right? Like, actually, I don't want to do that right now, but I'll do that with you tomorrow or this afternoon. I'll do that after I've had a little rest. Maybe I'll do that with you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's also okay to just give them a big hug and say, oh, you wanted me to do that right now. Yeah, that was hard. That's a big disappointment when I say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a little bit to not feel guilty over that, though.
Yeah,
especially if that's something that I know that they really truly value, just to deny that. And like, I can't say yes every time, right? There are things that come up. There's, like half the time I'll have to say no to specific games just because his 2-year-old sister is just going to come bowl it all over, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so he gets disappointed when I won't play the games with the huge setups. And it's like,
right. Another thing too is that we can say, okay, you know what? I can't play a game every day, right? Whatever your reasons are for that, you don't need to share your reasons. You could if you wanted to, but you could also say, but let's talk about what would be reasonable, right? Do you think if I played a game with you twice a week, that would be reasonable? And they might say, no, I want 5 times a week. Well, I'm not okay with 5 times a week, but I could be okay with 2 or 3 times a week. Would you rather 2 or 3? Right? And make it a kind of a problem solving effort. And then, actually follow through, and maybe they keep a little chart where they check off when you've played a game with them, and okay, this week I've checked off 2 checks. So yeah, we've done that. And then when they come to you with another game, it's like, oh, look, I already did the 2 games this week. Right. Not that they're not going to be disappointed. They may still well be disappointed, but we can, just say, yeah, that's hard. 2's my limit right now, Yeah. Yeah.
Some good advice. Well, what about dealing with the guilt of being either too kind of loose with the kids or too strict with our kids, or if we're too loose, worried that we should be more strict, like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a tough one, because I think, again, so much of this goes back to kind of discernment on the part of parents. Oftentimes we think, oh, maybe I shouldn't let them do that, or maybe I shouldn't say no about that thing. And I think first of all, with your first child, you tend to be way more strict than you are, as you go down the line with your kids. And that's normal and natural. You're going to have sort of tighter boundaries with the oldest one. And as time goes on, you're going to think, actually, you know what? I don't think that's as big of a deal. Like with our oldest couple of kids, like watching movies, we just did not watch movies. It was so rare that we did that. And as it went on, it was like, okay, as long as we choose well, the odd movie or watching a kid's TV show or whatever occasionally, it's just not that big a deal. It's going to loosen up on that.
Right.
And I think that's just the natural progression of parenthood, because we get a comfort level with something that we've never experienced before. And so of course we're going to be a little more, like you're learning to water ski, you're going to be very tentative and very careful, and the more you do it, the more you're going to ease up and, be a little more willing to take risks in a sense, right? Because you kind of get to know the boat, you get to know the driver, you get to know what this is like up on the water, so that's certainly one option of how things roll in terms of our strictness or laxness, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I think that it's so worthwhile to sit down with a spouse and say, you know what, I kind of feel like I don't know what's okay and what's not okay. What do you think, right? Like, because you can, you get to decide the rules in your own home. There's universal rules for sure that are, when we go to someone else's house, we don't go searching in their fridge. We don't, wander around their house without, someone from that household with us. There's certain things you don't do, right? So we sort of know there's basic cultural norms, but then there's also things like, wandering around with food, jumping on the couch, things that are, maybe okay in your house, but not okay in someone else's house. And you get to decide what the rules are. But sometimes we think, am I teaching them a bad habit by letting them do this thing?
Right.
And I think that just requires some discernment. Okay, what's okay? Let's talk about our kids at this age. Okay, right now what they want to do, some things really bug me, like jumping on the couch, super bugs me. Okay, don't let them, right? That's something, not that they're going to break the rule all the time, but then like, oh no, down you go, can't jump on the couch, down you go. You know, whatever it is that you decide is okay or not okay, you can just nicely deal with that issue. And but it's also like, if you think, okay, well, I don't really care if they jump on the couch, we're going to replace it in 5 years anyway, it's just an old couch, I don't really care.
Yeah.
So, there's no rule book saying jumping on the couch is an okay activity for your kids, or jumping on the couch is not, right? Or jumping on your bed, or whatever. Certain things that kind of make us crazy. So I think it's important for a husband and wife to actually sit down and say, you know what, I hate watching the kids walk around with food, right? I just feel stressed because their sticky hands are going to get on the furniture, or I just never know where there's going to be peanut butter or whatever. So, you have to decide those things. And how okay are you with that's, I forget the original question. Oh, about whether you're too lax or too strict, right? And so, I think in a sense, some part of, marriage is kind of hammering out what you're okay with, because sometimes you're totally okay with something. A lot of times it comes from your family of origin and your husband's not okay with it. So you have to kind of come to some common ground. Is like, okay, you're not okay with this, I am okay with this. So how do we manage this situation? Because then there has to be some give and take. Like, if one came from a much stricter background and one came from where you could just, anything goes, you have to sort of find common ground with that, right? So I think that that will help alleviate some of the guilt of that by actually sitting down and deciding what's okay or not okay. Right. Or if, say, for example, you're nagging your kids, you're telling them something to do over and over and over again, that, between you and your husband, say, okay, well, nagging, we know nagging is not good for anybody. So how many times do I reasonably ask a child to do something before I intervene? Right. And so maybe that's a matter of, deciding, okay, it's like, I'm going to say it once, maybe twice. And after that, I either just pick them up, bring them inside, or remove the thing that they're not listening about, or I take over the situation or whatever. This isn't working. I've already said no. I've already said you have to put the game away. So I'm putting the game away, end of story. Right. And so I think that walking with our spouse through what is okay and not okay will help us find the kind of the golden place where we're comfortable about what goes on in this house and what doesn't, and it's hard, right? It's really hard to take two separate people from two completely different backgrounds and find the common ground of what's okay and what's not okay. But those conversations are so worth it.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's a real sore point in marriage, like how you handle your kids, right? How you discipline.
Right. I agree totally. Yeah. Well, do we want to tackle one more?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, since this is kind of about cozy homeschooling, how about dealing with the guilt of, that fear that we're not teaching them enough of what they need to know, or I guess our perceptions of what they need to know.
Right. Yeah. Again, I think that we first of all need to, be really aware of our child's timetable. Right. We need to surround ourselves with people who are going to support us in our quest to allow the child to learn at the pace that they learn at, right? And to be okay with where they're at, right? And ideally, in most situations, most children are learning, are moving forward, right? If there's a stall and you're concerned about that, educationally, like with your son, that's okay, you have to sort of take a different approach. But in terms of the guilt of that, first of all, I think we need to surround ourselves with people who are talking the language of non-guilt. Okay. So, obviously our podcast, there's many other, podcasters out there who are going to support parents, or bloggers or speakers or YouTubers or whatever, who are going to support parents in that quest to be just respectful of a child's innate framework that they're going to learn in. Right. And so that can be one of the biggest things that we can do for ourselves to alleviate, fear or guilt about where the child is at. Right. you know, and the kinds of messages that you're going to be hearing from those things are going to support you and sort of affirm you that, okay, you know, my child is, first of all, pretty normal, because the age of reading can be anywhere from, you know, 3 or 4 to 11 or 12. That's normal. That's the normal range of things. A child can, you know, address certain math skills. Some kids very young, some kids, you know, it'll be 6 years later that they're actually able to, you know, and unless there's a learning disability, they, you know, all kids will be able to do that at some point, but they will very much be on their own timetable depending on how their brain works, right?
Right.
So I think kind of surrounding ourselves with people that are going to affirm us rather than not affirm us. One of the things that you have to be very sensitive to in terms of guilt and fear is that if you are using a curriculum that is causing you to feel guilt, get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you feel like this curriculum, your child's not measuring up to the curriculum, you know, it's not going to do you any favors unless you're very
Right.
comfortable with just saying, oh, well, we'll just skip this section, or, you know, we'll just tear that page out. You don't need to know that right now. We'll try that again in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But curriculum can be a very guilt and fear inducing thing. And you have to have a relationship with curriculum that is well ordered. Right. So the
Yeah.
relationship being, this is here to serve me, not to make me think that my child isn't you know, on track because they maybe can't do this particular section of the book, or they're
Okay.
not keeping up with this aspect of the curriculum, right?
Right.
You know, and so if something isn't serving you, a program, a curriculum, a voice, you know, out from outside saying he should be doing X right now, you know, those things you need to just put those things away from yourselves. And it doesn't mean, we get a bit hung up on curriculum because we spend a lot of money on it, right? And
Right.
so, you know, you don't have to get rid of it. You know, if you think it might work for another kid, it might, you know, whatever, but put it away. You know, maybe in 6 months, everything will be different, or 2 years from now, everything will be different, and it will be beautiful and really mesh with your child.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But don't let it own you, because a lot of, I would say the most common thing I've ever heard from homeschoolers is like this guilt surrounding curriculum, that the kid isn't keeping up to the curriculum.
Right.
Right. And so that's such a difficult place to put ourselves in, and that's just going to breed guilt and concern and
Sure.
make us feel inadequate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wrap for
Okay. Well,
tonight.
that's great. Well, hopefully that's some helpful ideas, anyways, about mom guilt and
Right.
you
We
know,
all feel
sorting
it.
through it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it doesn't, like, you know, this is, you know, good news and bad news, I guess. But, you know, even as a mom to adult kids, you know, you feel bad even because they carry burdens, right? And I mean,
Right.
we're human, we have burdens, but you just kind of wish you could carry it for them, and you can't,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can, you know, support them and love them, and maybe there's practical things you could do to help them, but ultimately, you know, even at this stage of the game, you know, I have to think, okay, you know what, I can't feel guilt about that, because,
Right.
you know, it's not my burden to carry. And you know, I can pray for them, I can love them, I can support them in whatever way I can, but, you know, this is unfortunately something that isn't my domain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's just constantly reminding ourselves. And, you know, again, just one last word on this is that plan time away to actually reflect on your life and your family is a really important thing. Plan, and I don't mean you don't have to go away from the house, but plan time alone, you know. And for me, that was never very much time, but I definitely needed a weekly couple of hours where I could just kind of regroup and consider, you know, the blessings that I have and where everybody was at in an objective way, because being away from our family helps us to be more objective.
Right.
You know, another thing that can help us with objectivity is actually just running things across other people, like a friend. You know, if you have a friend that you can talk to who's just, okay, you know, I feel like, you know, X, Y, and Z is just not working in my household and I'm feeling so much guilt about it,
Mm-hmm.
that person can, you know, just say, hey, well, that happened to me. And, you know, and you can sort of alleviate your guilt together, because guaranteed that friend is going to have, you know, her areas of guilt as well. Right.
Right.
So, you
I
know, our
actually
spouse, a friend. Yeah.
I have a good friend here who's a homeschooling mom, and she and I will at least touch base once or twice a week where it's like, hey, this
Good.
is what we did with our kids today. You know, it's like kind of like accountability, helping to keep us on track, and also almost like a way of putting down a review for ourselves of what we did. And so I love when we do that. And
oh, it's so good for us, right? And so important. Another thing too is writing everything down or taking pictures. Like if iPhones had been around, back in the day when I started, I would have taken a picture of everything we did, every block tower, every game we played, everything, because what a great visual record of what you've actually accomplished, right? And just for your own records, and just dump all that into an album, school year 2020, 2021, and dump all that in an album. Because at the end of the day, when you look back at that at the end of a day or a month, you'll think, holy smokes, we did a lot of stuff. Right. And there's a lot that we might not fall, what we don't think of as school, but it all is, right?
Yeah, totally.
All right, so we should wrap it up, but it's a good topic.
I agree.
Okay, so we will see you next week, and don't forget to submit questions if you have them. We'd be happy to add them to the list.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.